Hello gamers and welcome back. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshack if you want to call me by my endgame name. In this video, we're going to be going over all of the neutral legendary cards, whether or not you should disenchant or craft them, or kind of rating them, basically. One being the best card, do not disenchant it. It's very good and found in a lot of different decks. Two, being that it is okay, probably not the best card for its particular slot, but it's decent and you should hold on to it for a while until you get something better. And then the tier 3 is basically you can get rid of the card, disenchant it, you don't have to worry about a thing. So when I grade a card 1, 2, or 3, you now know what it means. From there, again, we're going to be talking about all of the neutral legendary cards in the standard format. I'm not going over any wild cards because that is just not what this episode is about. So with that, let's head on over into it. The first card that we're going to be talking about is Patches O'Houlihan. It is found in Pirate Warrior, a lot of rogue decks, a lot of aggro druids, a very popular card. Very powerful card. So with this, definitely a number 1. I don't recommend disenchanting Patches, at least for a little while, until maybe aggro decks aren't as good or maybe the card just stops seeing play. But for the most part, this is a very popular card. It's been popular since its release. It hasn't actually lost any popularity. It's still found in all of the same decks it was used in at the time. So with that, just a really good card if you're looking to play any sort of aggressive base deck. And yeah, definitely don't disenchant it. With this Shifter Xeris, this is a 3. You don't need this card at all. It doesn't really fit in any deck, and it's just an RNG card. You can disenchant it without any worry. Again, it doesn't fit into any particular deck. You can put it in whatever deck you want because, again, all these cards are neutral cards, but this isn't actually a card that you want to play in your deck. You'd rather disenchant it and then craft cards that you actually can use and that are good. Next card we're going to go over is Blood Mage. This is actually found in quite a few decks, whether you're playing Mage, Rogue, Druid at some points in time, Shaman. It's just a very powerful card, very flexible card, fits into a lot of different decks, and that's what you'll see a lot of with these neutral cards, is that they fit into a lot of different decks, and there's a lot of flexibility to them, which makes them a little bit better than class-specific cards. If you're like a free-to-play player and you can't afford all the cards, having a couple good neutral cards that fit into a variety of different decks is more powerful than just having one legendary that fits into one deck in one particular time, and you know what I'm saying. So with that, Blood Mage, definitely tier 1 in regards to crafting. Crafter if you don't have her, she's a good card to craft, but don't disenchant her if you have her. Lorewalker Cho is absolutely horrible. You can disenchant this guy, and you don't have to worry about a thing. Millhouse, again, horrible card. I don't own him. At one time, I owned a golden Millhouse Mana Storm, but I actually recently disenchanted him to make room for some other cards that I wanted with the new Knights of the Frozen Throne set. Again, not a card that fits in any particular deck. He's kind of like a joke legendary all over the place, and you can disenchant him. You don't have to worry about it. Nat Pagle, again, he used to be really good. It used to be at the end of your turn, you had a 50% chance to draw an extra card, but he was actually really powerful at the time. I'm pretty sure if they changed him back, he might see play again and he wouldn't be too powerful. Granted that a 2-mana 0/4 is pretty easy to kill right now. Granted that sometimes Doomsayers will die on turn 2, and that has 7 health. So currently, really bad card. You can disenchant him, you don't have to worry about him, but he's a card that I would think, I don't know why they wouldn't change him back to his original form where he was playable, and he probably wouldn't be that OP anymore. But anyway, rip Nat Pagle. Nat the Dark Fisher, again, another version of Nat Pagle, but instead of you drawing cards, your opponent draws cards, but because of that, he's actually a 2-mana 2/4, which is pretty powerful. He's pretty good in mill decks, but currently he's only found in mill decks, and even in mill decks, he can be replaced with other cards. Definitely a card that you can disenchant. Don't you worry. You don't have, like, you can disenchant him. You don't have to worry about a thing. No big deal there. And again, guys, like I mentioned in our class legendary guide, if you disagree with me or you really like Lorewalker Cho or Millhouse Mana Storm, whatever the case may be, you don't have to disenchant them. I'm merely just trying to help you get your collection and getting out all the junk that you don't need and being able to replace that with cards that you actually can put in your deck. I wouldn't make these videos if I didn't, like, they weren't helpful, right? Like, I'm not trying to stray you in the wrong direction. I'm generally just trying to help you get your collection up and to par with some of these other guys who know exactly what they're doing with their dust and have very powerful decks. So with that, Prince, there's actually, the popularity of the Princes has increased since their release. Originally, they were thought of as a joke, and then more and more people have been testing them. This particular Prince is found in Zoo decks, but only Zoo decks at the moment, and Zoo deck is still, it's not that great of a deck. So if you happen to get any of the Princes right now, you can probably disenchant them and not have to worry about a thing, since they are all found in very particular decks, and those particular decks aren't very good. But there are uses for them. They're just not the greatest uses. You should probably disenchant it and find a couple other key cards in the deck that you're trying to play, and it'll definitely be a lot better for you. So you can disenchant this guy, don't you worry. Beardo is currently found in OTK Paladin, but that's the only deck he's currently found in, and the deck still isn't that powerful. You can disagree with me. Be like, Rob, it's really good. You kill your opponent in 1 turn. That's fantastic. You do 1 time out of 10 games. But besides that, 400 Dust looks a lot better than a card that's only good in 1 particular deck, and that deck really isn't that great. So you can disenchant this guy, no worries. King Mukla, again, not a card that it was actually seen play in a couple Paladin and aggro decks a while back, like a long time ago, but currently, again, has no spot in any decks, doesn't really work with anything great. So you can disenchant Mukla, no problem, no big deal. Moros, again, he comes from an adventure mode, so if you have him, you don't really need him. He was currently thought to be pretty good in the Quest Rogue, where he would generate 1/1s, and those 1/1s would actually be 5/5s, because that's what the quest, completing the Rogue quest does, is turning everything into 5/5s. So that's actually not a bad card in that particular deck, but even in there, it wasn't even like a staple. It was kind of just like a tech or just like a funny card you could put in there just for memes. So you can disenchant this guy, no worries. Again, this falls under the priest, or the prince that we just went over, that this particular guy who was found in Zoo. This particular one isn't played at all. I've yet to see a single person play him, like, period. So disenchant, no big deal. Sergeant Sally. Potentially people thought this card was going to be really good. It's actually semi-good and wild. You can go Sergeant Sally, power overwhelming, and clear the board for 5, or clear the board for 4 mana and deal 5 damage to everything on your opponent's side. It's not bad, but it's currently not really used in any deck, so you don't really need it. You can disenchant it, no big deal. Master Overspark, again, this card was actually found a little while back when Cthulhu Warrior was good. There was actually, when Sylvanas didn't rotate out, Warrior decks needed some form of transform, whether they were transforming Cthulhu or transforming Sylvanas into something else. This was actually a really powerful tech card you could put in Cthulhu Warrior in the mirror match, which was, you could be like, Rob, you're crazy. Cthulhu Warrior, I don't even remember that time. I do, and this was a card that this saved my ass so many times, but currently it's just not used anymore. It's just not one of those cards that's found in any decks. I haven't played, I played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games, guys, every month, and it's just not a card you see. You can disenchant it, no worries. Arthas. So, a lot of people thought it would be pretty good, granted the fact that it gives you a random Death Knight card, which is a card that Lich King generates at the end of each turn. Lich King is a very powerful and popular card right now. He's not actually as good. I don't think he's actually that great in some decks. You know, some decks he's pretty good, some decks he's just not, but people still play him anyway. Arthas falls under the category of, like, you're paying a really high premium to get this random Death Knight card, and sometimes the Death Knight cards are just not that great. You know, you get Army of Dead and your deck relies on battle cries. You're not ever playing Army of Dead. You just don't, you're not doing shit. So I don't think Arthas is actually that great, and I think you can disenchant him. I would prefer, like, if I had a free-to-play account, I would disenchant Arthas and try to craft something that I actually need for a deck. And when I'm looking at all these cards, I'm looking at it as, like, if I were to get these cards on my free-to-play account, what would I do with them? And I would disenchant Arthas. There's no deck that actually needs him. Barnes, he's actually found in a couple decks, a couple high roll decks, more importantly, higher, like, Big Priest. He's found in some Ramp Druids. He's found in some Miracle Rogues, and some Miracle Rogues, not many, but some Shamans as well. I don't really recommend disenchanting Barnes because he's found in those decks, and those decks are pretty fun to play, and he's still decent, so I don't really recommend disenchanting Barnes. Genzo the Shark, not really that great of a card. You can disenchant him, no worries. He's not a staple in any particular deck right now. Kazakus. Kazakus Priest is a thing. Kazakus Mage, not really a thing. And then Kazakus Warlock, not really a thing. So you're playing this guy to basically go in one deck. Maybe Kazakus Mage can become a thing a little bit later in the season when the people start trying out different things besides just Jade Druid. I wouldn't recommend disenchanting Kazakus as of now, but it's a card that the card only fits in one of decks. It's not like it fits in other decks like Blood Mage and stuff like that. So I would put an eye on it. I wouldn't disenchant it if you get it, just because potentially it could be really powerful in the future. Another Prince, you can disenchant this guy, no big deal. It's pretty bad. You don't have to worry about a thing. Umbra. I've tested her in a lot of different Death Rattle decks, and she's just too slow. With the Death Rattle decks, a 4 mana 3/4 right now is just not great, and holding her until the late game to combo her with death rattles, it's just not worth the death rattle itself. Like, it's just, she's a really good card on paper, but just in actuality and playing her, she's just not great. So you can disenchant this card, no big deal. The Vorax, again, another card that on paper it seems to be like really good, right? You know, you play Vorax and then you buff them, and then the other creature gets a buff, and that's double buffs, and that's a lot of value. The thing is, it just doesn't live that long. It's a 4-mana 3/3 that your opponent can interact with. Again, if you're waiting till turn 8 or 9 to play this card with a buff, like, there's 9 or 10 mana minions that do the same thing as you using 2 cards on the Vorax to get that value versus just playing a Ysera, and that generates the same amount. So instead of having 2 cards that you've been holding in your hand, you just have that one that's good always versus this card that's only good sometimes. So again, you can disenchant, no big deal. Captain Greenskin, only found in Pirate Warrior. It's a staple in Pirate Warrior right now. I guess you could play other cards instead of it. I probably would disenchant it on my free-to-play account because Pirate Warrior is never a deck I'm really interested in playing at all. It's a very powerful deck right now, but it's not actually a card that I want to play, and you could probably disenchant it, no big deal. Elise. So it's found in control decks. It was more so found when on Journey to Un'Goro was the most recent expansion. Now that Frozen Throne has come into the picture, the control deck-esque meta has changed where Elise isn't really needed. You know, playing Elise and Priest and, you know, shadow visioning packs used to be a great way to win and outlast your opponent. Now you really don't need that because Anduin gives you a hero power that does 2 damage per turn, and if you use Raza, it costs no mana, and then you just kind of blow out your opponent that way. But I would recommend keeping Elise. I'd put her in the 2 category. She's not the best legendary right now. She used to be really good before I'd put her in 1, but right now I wouldn't really put her in 1. I'd put her in 2. Finja, a very interesting guy, again, very specific, only fits in Murloc type decks, and currently really only Murloc Paladin, and you can play a Murloc Paladin without Finja. I did it last season and I hit Legend with the deck, so you don't need Finja in your Murloc Paladin. Again, if you like Murloc decks, you can keep this card, but I think you can disenchant it. You don't really have to worry about it too much. It, again, only fits in one particular deck, and the deck that it fits in doesn't need this card to be good. It just is, if you want to play it, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. It doesn't really change too much other than the fact that sometimes it's really good and sometimes it'll be pretty bad. Harrison Jones, I'd keep this card for sure. It's depending on the meta is when he rises and shines or he just doesn't. It's a very weapon heavy meta. This guy is great when the meta isn't very weapon heavy. He's not the best card, but he's still a decent tech card almost at all times, because whether you're playing against a rogue, a paladin, hunter, even mages and warlocks who run Medivh, you know, this card can come in very useful and at least draw you 1 card in this matchup. Leroy Jenkins. This card is, how do I explain this card? I don't recommend disenchanting him because he's found depending again on the meta. He used to be found at Zulok, Face Hunter, Pirate Warrior, Rogue decks. It all depends on what's good and what's bad. Is pretty dependent on if Leroy is played or not. He's one of those cards that is never going to cycle out because he's part of the basic set. So I just recommend holding on to this guy, and you don't have to worry about, again, him cycling out, because if you disenchant him, eventually he's going to be in a deck that's good, and then you're going to want him back to try the deck. So I just hold on to him for now. If I got him on my free-to-play account, I definitely wouldn't disenchant him. Prince, you can disenchant. This card just sucks. You add 5 more cards to your deck, but you don't know what those cards are, and it really hurts the other cards in your deck that you may want to draw over some random cards that you don't know anything about. Aya, definitely don't disenchant this card. She's absolutely crazy in any Jade deck. Whether you're playing Jade Shaman, Jade Rogue, or Jade Druid, she's good. And even if you just throw in the Jade package, like, you don't even have to play a Jade Shaman to run Aya. You know, you play Evolve Shaman, and that just runs the Jade package, which is enough for Aya to get played. So that should tell you something. Really fantastic card. Very high value. Very, very good. Karen, another card part of the basic set that's never going to get cycled out that we know of. And it's good in Death Rattle decks. When the meta slows down, it's very good. I currently play him in my N'Zoth Warrior and my N'Zoth Shaman. Again, not the most popular decks, but still, it's a really powerful card, and I don't recommend disenchanting it. Again, due to the fact that it's never going to cycle out. So eventually, like same with Leroy, he will see play again eventually. Hemet the Jungle Hunter. He was found in a mage meme deck where the deck burns you basically out. You know, you get rid of all the cards in your deck and you're left with like Pyroblast, Fire Lands Portal, stuff like that. It's part of just a meme deck, and it's only that one particular deck that this guy is good in. You can disenchant this guy and you don't have to worry about a thing. Hogger, I'd put him in the 2 category. He's on my free-to-play account, and I put him in every deck because he's always, for some reason, this guy is always my first legendary on my free-to-play accounts. So I keep this guy on there as a meme, but he's still not a bad card. You can fit him into a lot of different decks if you just don't have other cards to replace him with. But normally you can disenchant this guy without a worry and actually get other cards that you need. But still, he's a fun card to play regardless. Illidan, you can disenchant this card. He's just bad. 5 HP for 6 mana isn't really worth it. If he sticks on the board, he generates 2/1s, but the problem with 2/1s is the fact that, again, they're 2/1s, they die to anything that does 1 damage to the field, and there's a lot of AoE running around right now. There's a lot of Druid, and Druids have the Plague card, and the Plague card's going to generate a 1/5 for every card you have on the board. So if you have a 2/1, they generate a 1/5, and yeah, you just get outvalued there. Madame Goya was found in a meme shaman deck, but that's about it. Again, a card that you can disenchant, not really have to worry about. Same thing with Mukla. He's found in sometimes Quest Mage, but I don't play him in my Quest Mage, and the deck still runs just as smooth. You can disenchant this guy. You don't have to worry about a thing. The Beast. Again, another shitty, there's a lot of shitty neutral cards, guys. You could be like, Rob, you're telling me every card sucks that I get that's neutral. I'm disenchanting everything. I don't know what to tell you. They just suck, man. They're not found in any decks. And Beast is no exception from that. It's a sucky legendary, and you can disenchant them, don't you have to worry. Black Knight, again, is a card that's part of the classic set. Follows the same rule as Karen, follows the same rule as Leroy. Sometimes he's not seen at all. He's never found in any deck. Sometimes he's all of a sudden found in 75-80% of decks played because taunts get really relevant. You know, Lich King is a taunt, and there's a lot of taunts flowing around with the Druid deck. So, you know, Black Knight gets more popular and Black Knight gets played. So it's one of those cards that I would keep. And even if it isn't really popular right now, you know, it's like a wave. It goes up and it goes down. And sometimes he's really popular. Sometimes he's not very popular at all. Rathodon, this guy just sucks. You can disenchant him. You don't have to worry about a thing. Baron falls under the same category. Again, Leroy, Black Knight, stuff like that. He's good sometimes, not good other times, and I don't recommend disenchanting him. Don Hancho, you can disenchant. I've tried to make this card work. Bone Mare is basically just a better version of this card. Bone Mare is a 7-mana 5/5 and give a card that's already on the board plus 4/4. So you get the effect immediately instead of playing this, and hopefully you have a minion in your hand. Hopefully you can play it on time, and hopefully you're not dead by the time that happens. So this is just a bad card. You can disenchant it. Hogger, Doom, Edwin, again, not a good card. People thought, no, he's just bad. You can disenchant him. Curator, good card. And it's found in a couple decks, mainly Paladin and Taunt Warrior. Even though Taunt Warrior is not so popular, Paladin is still a very popular deck and still runs Curator. You get to draw 2 to 3 cards from this guy when you play him for 7 mana, and it's a 4/6. His body is not the greatest, but it's decent. But the fact that he has Taunt and you draw 2 to 3 cards is really good. Twin Emperor Veklar, I'm going to put him in the category of 2 because he fits in Cthulhu decks, and Cthulhu, you can build any deck Cthulhu. So, you know, newer free-to-play players, they don't have a lot of cards. They get a free Cthulhu. They open up a Twin Veklar. They can build themselves a pretty decent Cthulhu deck and hit rank 5. You know, I don't think Cthulhu decks are going to be able to hit Legend right now with Jade Druid being a thing. But you can still hit rank 5, in my opinion, with any form of Cthulhu deck. And because we were even doing fine with a Pokemon, basically an evolved Cthulhu Shaman deck. And we had over a 55% win rate in Legend with it last season. So I don't see why a Cthulhu deck wouldn't be able to hit your rank 5 if you happen to have Twin Veklar. So I wouldn't disenchant that guy. Gruul, you can disenchant, don't you worry. He's not. For an 8-mana 7/7, it's going to be an 8-mana 8/8 at the end of the turn that can easily be killed. You don't want that guy. Medivh found in a bunch of different decks, whether you're playing Mage, Warlock, Priest, Druid. People have put him in everything. His staff is absolutely insane. It's crazy value, so definitely do not disenchant this guy, and he fits into a bunch of different decks. Boogeyman. This guy's just bad. Disenchant him. I'm not going to explain this guy. This guy just sucks. Lich King. This is a really popular card right now. It fits, in my opinion, in some decks. People are throwing him into just about everything to test him, which is cool. And it's going to happen at the times of new expansion. Plus, he's the Lich King. Everybody wants to play him, right? But it currently, in my opinion, really only makes sense in like Big Priest and maybe Big Druid. But besides that, like, you don't need this guy in your deck. Like, the cards that he generates you, half the time you're not even able to use them effectively. So I wouldn't disenchant him because he's just a cool card and he's used in some decks, but he's not as good as what people make it out to be. It's not like my first card on my free-to-play account I'm gonna craft is the Lich King. Alexstrasza, definitely keeper. She fits into, again, a variety of different decks, whether you're playing mage, sometimes some dragon decks, and I've even found it in handlock at some point in times. So again, based on the meta and what decks are popular, Alexstrasza sees play or doesn't see play. So it's, again, one of those cards that fall under the Leroy Jenkins, Karen, Black Knight, stuff like that. Malygos, again, I want to put it under the Black Knight, the Karen and Alexstrasza saying, but again, this doesn't see a lot of play at all, even in comparison to Alexstrasza, which is, yeah, it's good, but it's not super popular. Malygos is one of those cards that, again, fits into very, very specific decks, and even those decks sometimes aren't that great. So, and due to it being a basic card, I would hold on to it because it's never going to cycle out. Maybe it sees play eventually, but if you really need the dust, you can disenchant this card, and it doesn't hurt you, but if you can hold on to it, I wouldn't be against that either. Noggenfogger, this guy just sucks. You can disenchant him, don't you have to worry. He doesn't fit into any particular deck. Norzdomu, again, sucks. 9 mana, 8/8 that speeds up turns. As cool as that may sound, you want 9 mana cards that actually do something, like Ysera and Alexstrasza, and even Malygos in comparison. So this guy just sucks. Onyxia, this was actually found in some Token Druids back when Token Druid, like late game Token Druid was a thing, when you could run like Wisp of the Old Gods, Onyxia, Sonaris, double Arcane Giant, stuff like that in your Token Druid Violet Teacher. But now the deck is just so fast and the tokens are just so easily you can generate tokens so easily that you don't really need a 9 mana 8/8 that generates a bunch of 1/1s, because you can do it on turn 5 and just generate a bunch of 1/5 tokens with taunt. So you can disenchant Onyxia. You don't have to really, but she's part of the basic set, so she's not really cycling out. She could see play a lot later on when maybe there's some form of like dragon deck that, like Token Dragon, who knows, but currently she doesn't really see any play. Osrook, I thought this card always sucked and never saw play. I never played somebody against me that played this, and I was like, oh no, we played this 9 mana 5/15 taunt. Fuck me. No, this card's just bad. Suggoth, I actually like this card a lot. I couldn't really make him work in my Taunt Warrior back in the day when Justicar was a thing, because he has 9 mana, and I've still played him anyway just because I liked him, but there's probably better cards to play. 9 mana is a really hard slot to fill because you can't really combo him with anything. Like when you play this guy, you play nothing else. You can't hero power, you can't play a 2 mana card, you can't play anything else. You just play this one dude and hopefully your opponent can't kill it. So at the moment, he doesn't actually fit into any deck, which is sad, but I don't think he's the worst card, so I put him in 2. Ysera, definitely don't want to disenchant her. She's one of the most powerful late game dragon cards you can play, and almost in general you can play. The fact that if she sits on the board for a couple turns, 2 or 3 turns, and doesn't get killed, the value that she gives you is, very, very good, because the dream cards are crazy good. So with that, don't disenchant, very good. Cthulhu, obviously you get this for free, don't disenchant it. You can build yourself any form of Cthulhu deck with any class. Deathwing, don't disenchant, depending on the meta, this card goes in and out. It was sometimes found in dragon decks, obviously, but tempo decks sometimes, even Druid, it's found in, it's a card that you can like kind of tech into any deck, really, and maybe it'll pull off you some juicy wins sometimes, so I wouldn't disenchant this guy. But on the other hand, this Deathwing that doesn't clear the entire board, you can disenchant this guy unless you're going to play Big Druid. And even I'm currently playing Big Druid, and my list doesn't even run this guy. So you can disenchant this particular. Don't disenchant this one. The normal Deathwing, big dick swinger Deathwing, kills the whole board. Don't get rid of that guy. This guy, the one standing on like a little hill, acting like a badass, he's not a badass. You disenchant that guy. And N'Zoth, of course, don't disenchant this guy. You can build again, any deck can be a N'Zoth deck, and the deck can be pretty good. So I recommend keeping this guy just because of the flexibility of the card. Moving on to Yogg, I don't recommend disenchanting Yogg. Again, you can fit Yogg into almost any deck. Flexibility of the card is endless, and it can win you a lot of games. Plus, depending on the meta, he's good or bad. And Rage, this card is questionable. Like he's played in Big Priest and he's played in Big Druid, and that's it. Both those decks are very, very, very expensive. So if you're not playing Big Priest and Big Druid, you don't have to play Rage, which means you can disenchant Rage. He's not as flexible as Yogg or N'Zoth or Cthulhu, so he's one of those that you can disenchant. You don't have to worry about a thing, again, unless you're playing Big Druid or Big Priest. So with that, we're going to wrap up this legendary neutral disenchant, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and if I happen to miss out on anything, or if you'd like to add on to anything I've said, you can feel free to do that in the comment section below. As always, I'm Robert Warshack, and happy whatever the hell day it is.